So, the Amazing Digital Circus has finally come out, and it's been absolutely ravaging the internet as of late. And I'm not kidding when I say that either. I haven't seen this much universal praise for a show since Hazbin Hotel, but we all know how that's been going recently. It's not just on my Twitter timeline, it's on everything. I've been getting posts about it on my Instagram, in the Discord servers I'm in, hell, even in, that's right. Having been a longtime fan of Gooseworx's work, and given her pristine repertoire and recent collaboration with Glitch, which I had never heard of up until this point, I decided to take it upon myself to give this one a watch. And after watching it, I can safely say, I'm really mixed on it. It's not outright garbage like Hello Boss.
And when I become hungry, I want to choke on that red of yours, your and lick all of your before taking out your and with more teeth until you're screaming like a fucking baby.
But it's certainly not what it was hyped up to be. Now, before I run my mouth, it's probably best if I start us off with a synopsis, just in case there are people who haven't seen the pilot that are watching this video. The Amazing Digital Circus follows a jester girl named Pomni who finds herself sucked into a digital realm which she cannot escape from. The ringmaster, Kane, has trapped her and many others into this realm and doesn't want them to escape. There's this whole thing where if you go insane, you turn into a giant black eye monster, and if Kane catches you, he throws you into this black pit, so yeah. But that's essentially a rundown of the show. Okay, with that underway, let's get to actually talking about it. It's not funny. Now, color me subjective, but too much of this show grounds itself in interchangeable comedy. Some jokes, I will say, did make me laugh, but oftentimes I'd find myself staring at the screen, completely stone-faced. It's this use of internet comedy that really bogs down the jokes and humor in this show. You can make these jokes work if you really wanted to, it just takes build-up. This happens way too often, but characters just scream or yell and that's the punchline. Once you've seen the same brand of humor repeated multiple times throughout the entire show, it gets tiresome. I don't think I need to talk much about why random humor in shows can get really obnoxious, so I'm just gonna skip over that one, but anyone can do awkward humor. So when the pilot does it, it's just more of what you'd expect. Characters looking at each other before saying something or doing something. Very cheap and easy jokes. What made the jokes I laughed at legitimately funny was the fact that there was substance to actually work with, and the setup paid off. The name generator joke actually worked because it was set up. The voice actor also did a pretty good job of executing the joke, so I'll give credit there. Same reason for the escalator joke. It was set up well, and it also fit into Jax's character. Two examples of jokes that work, and it's because they were both set up. With most of the jokes just being random, or loud, or awkward, it doesn't actually carry any comedic essence to it, because the punchline isn't set up. It's just an end without a start. Now let's talk characters. First off, the designs. Absolutely no complaints here. They're actually really good. All of the characters look different from any I've seen, and the designs fit the world perfectly. If you took the characters and only showed a silhouette of them, I could list off who's who. The difference in sizes and shapes makes them stand out amongst one another, so there isn't really any one character whose body proportions look near identical to the other. Some characters are long and stretched out, and some are short and narrow. And none of these characters share the same art style. There are very few similarities between overall designs between characters, so it really helps each one stand out. For example, every character has a different set of eyes. A small detail, sure, but it really adds a lot in terms of separating each character. Kinger has bloodshot, realistic-looking eyes, while Pomni has outlined eyes with what I can only assume is the top of a circus tent for pupils. Now compare the design philosophy of this show to one like Hell of a Boss, and that's when you really notice it. Fortunately, the Digital Circus ensured that each character is different in almost every aspect, so that's not a problem here. Whilst the characters are all very creative in their design, their personalities just fall flat. The main issue I have with most of the characters is that they can be summed up with a few words or just an adjective. Jax is the mischievous one, Kinger is the crazy one, and Zubul is the grumpy one. Kane, Ragatha, and Pomni are the only three that actually feel more complex. Kane seems to be putting up a front, and because of that, it feels like there's something deeper behind his character. Ragatha is shown to be really compassionate, but is also hiding her feelings, whether that be judgmental or something else. And Pomni is the main protagonist, so of course we'll see development from that. I understand that this is just the pilot, and these characters most likely will become more complex as time goes on, but far too often do I see web shows similar to this leave their characters untouched and just keep their personalities to a minimum, as opposed to actually fleshing them out and making them more interesting. It's fine to have characters who only serve a singular role, but the show is pointing towards the idea that it will have deeper themes in the future, so not having those characters reflect the complexity of the narrative you're going for will hinder the impact and quality of the show. The animation can look smooth in some parts and clunky in other parts. Fortunately, with these being 3D models, the consistency of the characters aren't all over the place at times, but there are moments in this pilot where the character moves like it only has 4 keyframes. The running animations especially just have this overbearing stiffness to them, to the point where it just looks like they're gliding across the floor. There's also some moments where things just clip through other things. Granted, you wouldn't notice them unless you really tried to see them, but once you see one, it's really hard to stop paying attention to them. There are also a lot of continuity issues in this pilot. Pomni's hand just decides it's no longer corrupted at times. Sometimes the distance between characters just changes. Like, I'm not crazy here, right? This isn't some kind of nitpick either. This is recurring. It happens so often. Characters will just disappear in shots or reappear in different places. Like, if Pomni was right next to them, how did they move away from her? And before you say something like, "Oh, well, they could have just gotten up and walked over there," that wouldn't make any sense because they're shown getting up. So what, did they just crawl away from her, stop, and then proceed to get up? And then Kinger and Gangle just disappear in the next shot. Like, what? The scene following it also has the same issue. Ragatha just disappears, which, okay, I'll give that a pass. She was behind Jax a bit, but Zubul is standing center to the pillar, but then is shown right next to it. Characters just constantly move or disappear between shots. It's disorienting. Sometimes environments just completely change, even though we saw them completely untouched while the monster was in there, but it only changed after the monster left? What? Sometimes the same environment is used repeatedly. Like, man, what the fuck? I get it's an indie production, but come on. And again, sometimes characters just pop out between shots. Kaufmo was right behind her and then disappeared in the next shot. The fact it's a pilot shouldn't excuse this either. The point of a pilot is to leave a good impression. This does not leave a good impression. This conveys the opposite feeling. I know there had to be something in the way of a budget behind this, otherwise they wouldn't have the funds to pay people or produce merch. So with that in mind, how on earth is this acceptable? The studio itself is supposedly worth $500,000, which definitely isn't a small sum, so what the fuck? Alright, I'm going to calm down now, just gonna cool my head, forget about all of what I was previously ranting about. Let's talk about something good, like the voice. Voice actors can make or break a show oftentimes, but fortunately, almost all of them do a really good job in this pilot. There are definitely moments, but those are few and far between. The best part about the voice actors is that the voices they're doing actually fit the characters. Kane's voice especially stands out, and no, that isn't to knock any of the others, but the expressiveness of his voice and just overall strength fits the character so smoothly.
My name is Kane. I'm your ringmaster, and I'm here to show you the most jaw-dropping, heart-stopping, mind-bending paraphernalia you've ever laid your eyes upon!
There was never a moment where I thought another person could voice him, because his voice just works so well with that character. However, there was one voice in particular that I didn't like, and that was Kinger. I know Kinger is meant to be this crazed lunatic, but did the voice have to be so obnoxious?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for the recap. Boy, we're not very good at this, are we?
Fellas.
Jax!
It may simply be a problem with the character itself, but something about the portrayal of the character just annoyed me. Another thing I want to mention regarding the voice actors is the fact that they do such a good job of making the conversations actually feel like they're taking place between two people within the same room.
About the adventures? Why even go on them at all? Why not try to find a way to leave?
Well, we usually do when we first arrive, but after a while you start to realize that you really can't leave, and constantly chasing an unattainable goal will start driving you a bit crazy. And eventually you get to asking what the point of anything is, and you completely lose sight of who you are and why you're even alive, and when you reach your breaking point, something really terrible can happen.
To compare, there are moments in Monkey Wrench's first episode where the interactions just feel...
Ghosting? What? Ghosting?
It's okay, calm down. No one's gonna ghost egg you.
Can I shoot him, please?
jarring. It's this unrealistic tone that's being interjected into the exchange that just makes it feel like they're in separate rooms just reading off the script. I have no idea what the recording process was for the Digital Circus, but everything just sounds natural. Now let's talk about the music, which is actually probably one of the best parts about this pilot. Something I really expected this pilot to have a problem with was the music matching the tone of each scene, but surprisingly it doesn't have this issue. Yeah, the music actually fits each scene. It's intense when it needs to be, eerie when it should be, and jovial when it has to be. It all works so well. On top of that, it's not just a single instrument the entire time. I think the track that most people point towards in terms of quality is the track that plays when the camera is panning in on Pomni's face in the final shot.
Without any of the nutritional benefits.
Sheesh, lay off it. Since when are you an expert on the digital world?
Expert on the what?
It's filled to the brim with elements, and you can actually sense the track building up as opposed to just staying tonally consistent throughout the entire runtime. It's a collision of both real instruments and digitized elements. Plus, the choir is definitely the cherry on top. Another track that I think was just perfect was the one used during the scene in which Pomni is running through the doors. It balances between being both cartoonishly crazy and also whimsically disturbing. It fits so well into the scene, but it's also just a solid track. The synthy ambiance in conjunction with the piano makes this track sound so rich. It's great. Gone Mad was the only unused track out of all the ones listed, but even that one sounds good. I'm actually shocked they didn't include it because it could have worked well for a lot of other scenes. Now this is a short one, but dialogue is important in just about any piece of media, so how does it fare in this pilot? Not the worst I've ever heard, but there's a lot that just doesn't work. It's a mixed bag. Most of the main gripes boil down to characters just having dialogue that's painfully on the nose.
Well, I think I'd like to ask him about it, if this was real, which it isn't, because it's a dream.
I realize the character is supposed to be in denial, but dialogue that just flat out feels like they're stating they're in denial isn't really clever. There isn't really a whole lot more to cover about this pilot, so I'll just mention some final thoughts I had while watching it. One thing that left me confused at the end was the fact that Ragatha and Pomni have this sort of tension between them, and I just don't understand why or how this could be when there isn't really anything to warrant it. I thought about it for a while and considered that maybe Ragatha was upset with Pomni for trying to escape, but she never actually saw Pomni go through the door. At least, there wasn't anything to indicate that she did, so that can't be the case. The other thing that I considered was maybe Ragatha was upset she didn't get Kane fast enough, but even at that, I don't understand how she could be mad when she knows Kaufmo was chasing Pomni. It makes me feel like there was supposed to be a different scene in which something happened between them, or maybe like a different piece of dialogue, or Ragatha witnessed her go through the door, but there isn't. So the interaction they have at the end just doesn't make any sense. Also, at the dinner scene, Ragatha just freezes in place. I thought it was pretty funny, but also, like, come on, you think we wouldn't notice? I also hope they lean more into the darker themes. The show does such a good job at making the spookier elements actually feel twisted, and I just wish we got to see more of that. We see Pomni run through the doors for like 1 minute and 37 seconds, and yes, I did time that. But when you compare that to how much screen time the giant worm thing has, you realize just how little we get exploration-wise when it comes to the darker themes. Now, I know there were constraints on time, but you could have cut down the worm thing's screen time and things would have been just fine. They could have used that time to further explore the show's more intriguing themes. I mentioned this before, but I have to say it again. There is so much clipping in this pilot. They could very well just excuse it by saying, well, it takes place in a video game, it's meant to clip. But in all honesty, that'd be so lazy. Because there are moments where I know it is not supposed to clip, but it does. And it's either because someone didn't bother to actually look over the footage, or people are just lazy. It could be an oversight or a lack of resources, but even at that, how hard is it to just move something ever so slightly? In all honesty, did seriously no one catch this in the editing room or when they were rendering the footage? And just watching it back, there are moments where the hair doesn't clip through the outfit, so it's definitely not intentional. Also, there's a moment where the door opens up just without her actively pushing on it. I've given this pilot a lot of flack, but I really do want to see it succeed as a show. I really hope the animation issues get addressed because there's so many, but I also just want to see better writing as far as comedy goes. I know the comedy's meant to cater to a niche group of people, but having what feels like the same set of jokes just repeat over and over becomes really obnoxious after a while. You don't need to hire a professional writer to make your jokes. And it's also fine to have random comedy intermixed with more thoughtfully written comedy, but that can't be the main source of funny. If you end up doing that, you just begin throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. Obviously, it should be said, I don't blame Gooseworx for the writing. I blame this guy. Anyways, there's a lot I hope they address before continuing forward with the show, because God knows they will. I'm sure the team will grow and develop once the show actually begins production, but I pray they don't resort to using the same techniques and decide to actually step up the quality in both writing and animation. I anticipate this show's future, and I really hope there's less to say about it in the next episode, but if it ends up being really bad, I guess I'll just have to come back. I'm kidding, obviously, but I do anticipate what comes next. That's it though. Review over.